investing in yourself is probably going to have a higher return than any stock market investment, any real estate investment you can make at that time. All right, let's talk a little bit about what to do financially in each decade depending on how old you are. Let's start first with your 20s. If you're in your 20s, you either are just getting into your first career most likely, or you're just getting out of college. So if you're just getting out of school and you're getting your first job, ideally you want to look for a job that does have a 401k plan. And if they have a 401k plan with a match, and what that means is you put in 5%, for example, and maybe they match you another 5%. That's the minimum that you want to do. If you're somebody who's not planning to get a job, but you want to be an entrepreneur during this time, then the best thing you could do is invest in yourself. Honestly, investing in yourself through courses, coaching, books, education programs, that is going to be the best investment you can possibly make at 20 years old. Investing in yourself is probably going to have a higher return than any stock market investment, any real estate investment you can make at that time. Getting very clear on what you want to do, what your skill set is, finding mentors, building a network, all those things in your 20s are going to provide so much return over time that even if you don't save anything, you're going to be in a much better spot if you invest into those things, and they may cost you all the money you have at this particular time. But if you're somebody who's going to go into a job, the 401k is going to be the best place to start to at least get that. If you have a little bit more money and you can put away more than your match in your 401k, then you want to check into an account called a Roth IRA. Investments in this account will grow over time and will be tax-free, and this is a beautiful thing for your long-term growth and compound interest. But if you're somebody who doesn't have any money to invest, where do you start? The first thing you can do is just beginning to learn to manage your money properly. Create your first budget. Learn how to actually write down what you're bringing home for income. Write down what your expenses are, and if you have any money left over. By learning to manage your money and simply manage your cash flow, even if you can't save anything right now, you're going to be in such a better spot long term by getting this right in your 20s versus waiting to your 30s or later. If you are somebody who is in a place where purchasing a home might be an option, I'm in California. Average home price here is close to $800,000, maybe even more at this point. Purchasing a home with your first job's income is very difficult unless you have parents that can help you out and give you a little bit of extra money. So that may not be the first goal. But if you're somebody who's living in the Midwest, for example, and you can buy a house that's in the price range of your current income, well, then you might want to start saving beyond your match in your 401k for that down payment on your first home. Getting into real estate, especially if done right, can be a very powerful way to grow wealth over time. Doing so in your 20s and before you even have to rent could be even better. So if you have to live at home, for example, with your parents so you can save more money, don't be ashamed to do that in your 20s. There's nothing wrong with that at all. In your 20s is a really good time to make mistakes, but it's also a good time to make power moves like keeping your expenses as low as possible and saving everything you possibly can to put either into yourself, into real estate, or into the stock market for the long term. Now, getting into your 30s. Getting into your 30s is a little bit different. You're going to have a lot more things pulling you in different directions in your 30s. The main thing in your 30s is just doing everything you can to stay consistent with your finances and consistent with balancing your expenses. I know this time in your 30s, you're going to want to travel and do different things and see the world. I want you to do all of that, but I want you to make sure you're saving at least 10% of your income towards your long-term savings goals at this point. That needs to be 10% of the money you are earning. If you're getting a match of another 3 or 5%, that's just gravy on the biscuit, as they say. But you need to save at least 10%, ideally 15%, but that is for the long term. That's not including anything else outside of what your current expenses are. So you may, during this time, be needing to manage growing a family, dealing with house payments, and other expenses that are coming up. You might be thinking about planning for college for your kids at this point. In reality, you should not be thinking about college for your kids before your expenses are taken care of properly. So if you're saving 15% of your money, at least 10%, but 15% ideally, then you can start thinking about putting money in other places. 529 accounts are great for kids' college savings. If you look into a 529 account for your state, that might be the best way to go if you get a state tax deduction. If you do not get a state tax deduction, then you want to look for states that have the best investments for the lowest costs. A couple good states to check out are Utah, Nevada, New York, and possibly even California. Those plans have very low cost investments, and it doesn't matter what state you live in, you can invest in any other state's 529 plan. But if your state offers a state tax deduction, then you definitely want to consider investing in your state's plan first. One other thing to consider in your 30s if you can, or even earlier by the way, is investing in what's called a health savings account, called HSA. If you have one of these accounts at work because you have a high deductible health plan, these accounts are very useful later down the road in early retirement or even in later retirement. With these accounts, you get what's called a triple tax advantage contribution. The first tax advantage you get is that you get a tax deduction off of your income in the year you contribute. That is a very nice thing because you're going to save taxes today. If your HSA plan allows you to invest the money, well, then you can invest the money tax deferred, and that money is going to grow and compound over time, similar to a 401k or IRA would. And the third tax benefit is you get a tax-free distribution for healthcare expenses now or in the future. If you're going to be investing in an HSA, I highly recommend that you do not spend the money out of that account today if possible, and you pay for your expenses out of your cash flow. By investing the money out of your cash flow, that's going to allow the money that you invested in your HSA to grow and compound over time tax deferred. Here's the key though. If you do pay for health expenses out of your cash flow, then you want to save those receipts. Ideally, you'll save them somewhere where you can get to them anytime. A shoebox is fine, but using an account like Dropbox or Google Drive to take pictures of and scan the documents so that you can get to them later is going to be really useful for you to stay organized and make sure you don't lose anything. The key with the HSA is anytime you want in the future, all of those payments for medical expenses that you had over time that you paid out of cash flow, those can be reimbursed from your HSA tax-free in the future. So here's a nice thing to think about. If you invest the money tax deferred and you invest the money in your HSA, and let's say that money grows for 5, 10, or 15 years, and now the money you put in has doubled or tripled, well, you can now pay yourself back in the future for all those expenses that you had, medical expenses, I should say, and that will be paid back with tax-free dollars to you at that point. And then you're going to have the growth of those investments that was in there that's going to continue to grow and invest for you over time. So HSAs, when used properly, are very powerful. I could do a whole video on those just alone. But if you have that available to you and you have an HSA qualified plan, you really want to think about doing that and getting your contributions in there as soon as possible. In your 30s, you also want to make sure you're doing some of the basic things to make sure you're protecting yourself. If you have children or a spouse, you might want to start thinking about term life insurance. Term life insurance is very low cost, and you can get around $1 million or $2 million for probably $30 to $70 a month if you're in good, healthy shape. This is just something that you want to get in place if anybody else relies on your income. If you're single and nobody else relies on your income, you have no kids, you don't really need life insurance of any sort at this point. I wouldn't require it. But if you have a spouse that doesn't work, for example, they can't provide if you were to pass away and they have to pay for all the expenses on their own, or if you have children that rely on your income, life insurance is going to be really important. So I do generally recommend term. Cash value does have a place at certain times, but more than likely the person selling you cash value insurance is going to make a big commission, and you're better off putting that money into your IRA, your Roth IRA, or your 401k versus a cash value insurance and just getting that cheap term that covers that basic insurance need. In your 30s, you really want to consider as well getting a basic estate plan in place. An estate plan will be something like a will, right? A will is something where you just basically say, if you pass away, this is where I want all of my stuff to go to. If you own a home or you have, again, family or business, you might want to consider upgrading and getting a trust. You might think trusts are for the wealthy when you hear terms like trust fund babies and things like that. But in reality, everybody that owns a home, especially in states like California where I live, needs to have a trust. If you have anybody in your family that could potentially cause you a problem if someone were to inherit your money and might want to contest the will, a trust is going to give you extra legal protections as well. Along with that, you may want to consider things like healthcare directives, power of attorneys, and all the other items you need to have a proper estate plan. But at minimum, you want to get the will, get that in place, and then also make sure all the beneficiaries on your accounts, such as investment accounts and also your bank accounts, have beneficiaries on them that are titled to people that you want the money to go to if something were to happen to you. If you don't title them, then the courts could possibly decide, and that could be an absolute disaster. You do not want that to happen. If you have kids, it's even more important to have a trust in place to make sure that they don't inherit more money than they should for their particular age. Your kids may be great today, but if they develop any sort of alcohol, drug, or other behavioral problem, such as gambling, if they received all of your money all at once, that could be bad for a lot of children. So I really recommend that you think about setting up a trust to where that money is directed and they receive all the money at a certain age. It doesn't have to be very late in life, but at least, maybe late 20s or 30s, so that when they receive that money, they're mature enough to be able to handle it if something were to happen to you. All right, your 40s. I'm in my 40s right now. So your 40s, you're young, you have maybe 20 years or more till retirement age, but in reality, you don't have a lot of time. So if you haven't been planning your finances now up into your 40s, now's the time to really start stepping on the gas. You want to look at things like maxing out your 401k or maxing out your Roth IRA to start saving as much as possible. If you still have debts like student loans, you want to get your student loans paid off and get those cleared out. You should not be carrying credit card debt at any age, but if you have any debts at all outside of your home, maybe a car payment, because if you can get a car payment at a very low interest rate, then that could be something that's still okay to keep. But for most people, you want to get out of debt as much as possible and no high interest debt of any sort. 40s is going to be the time where now you want to put all extra savings to your long-term goals to make sure that you are on track for retirement. Again, you want to do this all while balancing out things like vacations and having fun, but your 40s are a really good time to start, usually you're earning more in your 40s. So you can start putting the pedal down on your savings a little bit more and make sure that you're getting on track for that good retirement. If you do not have a home yet by your 40s, this is when you really want to think about putting all your savings that you can towards a down payment on a house. And by the way, there are a lot of programs out there to help you buy homes. In California, there's a new program that will put down potentially 20% of the purchase price. So you really want to research your state and local programs if you don't have money to put down on the home, but you want to get yourself in at least a primary home in your 40s because the mortgage is going to generally be about 30 years to pay off. If you make an extra payment on your mortgage, and the best way to do that, which I recommend, is by paying your mortgage bi-weekly, right? So instead of paying your mortgage once a month, you pay 50% of your mortgage every 2 weeks. This should knock off between 5 and 7 years off your mortgage, and you should pay it off in about 23 to 25 years if you do this properly. But you want to get a home in your 40s so that you're on track to at least be by your 60s having a paid off home, and then you're going to be in a really good spot for retirement if you're saving 15% of your money in your retirement accounts, or 20, ideally more, and have a paid off home. You're going to be in a really good shape over time. Your 50s. The 50s are when the red lights start flashing, okay? The tunnel that you're going down towards retirement is starting to get brighter and brighter. That light is getting brighter and brighter. You can call this the emergency zone if you don't have any retirement savings or very minimal retirement savings. Your 50s is the time you really want to make sure that your retirement is on track. And if possible, you want to begin what are called catch-up contributions. So in your 401k for 2023, when I'm recording this, you can contribute $22,500 to your 401k before age 50. That's the max. Once you get to age 50, you have something called a catch-up contribution, where you can contribute up to another $7,500 per year to your 401k plan. That's for you and your spouse if you're married. So that's up to $30,000 that you can put into these plans to put away towards your retirement. Remember, if you're in a high tax bracket, like the 22% or the 24%, well then if you're going to put in $1 to your retirement account, it's only going to feel like 76 or 78 cents. If you have state tax as well, like in California, we have a 9.3% state tax at that 22% federal tax rate, it's going to only feel like you're putting away 60 or 70 cents to each dollar, but you're putting the full dollar in your retirement accounts that, one, is going to save you money on taxes today, but it's also going to help build that retirement account for the future. So if you're in your 50s, catch-up contributions are available to you. You also have another $1,000 catch-up contribution you can do for your Roth accounts or traditional IRAs if you do not have a 401k available. That amount will be indexed for inflation starting in 2024 due to the new Secure Act 2.0. So that $1,000 of catch-up contribution will start going up over time after 2024. But your 401k is going to be the most powerful. If you're self-employed, you have other options there with solo 401ks or SEP IRAs that you might want to consider, but that's beyond the scope of this video. If you're in your 50s, you also want to start thinking about retirement healthcare. Okay, retirement healthcare is one of the largest expenses for many people. And it's one of the scariest things that I see a lot of people not retiring because they can't afford healthcare, even if they could live off of their savings prior to 65 when Medicare kicks in. If you didn't know, at age 65, we have government healthcare, which is called Medicare. It's actually a very good health plan. Honestly, it's financially strained, so we're going to see what happens there. But it's a very good health plan if you are 65 years old or older. But many people don't want to wait till 65 to retire. The average retirement age is closer to 62, but at that point, you don't have health care that covers you outside of going through what's called the ACA or Obamacare healthcare exchange. It used to be very, very expensive depending on your income level, but recently there's been subsidies that have helped out with this, so this has gotten a whole lot better. But you want to start thinking about healthcare. And this is where we go back to your HSA, the health savings account I was telling you about, to start in your 20s or 30s, because that money there can be very useful for healthcare. And if you've been putting money away in that account and you have healthcare things that come up, you can take that money out tax-free to pay for those expenses, pay for your deductibles or whatever it may be. As we age, we're going to have healthcare things that come up. You're going to be, more than likely, not for all people, by the way, but more than likely, you're going to have more healthcare issues in your 50s than you would in your 40s. You're going to have more healthcare issues in your 60s than you would in your 40s, and so forth and so forth. Some people decide to get healthier later in life, so that's not always the case. But in general, our bodies start to age, and we start to have things that come up later in life, and that's why you need to plan for healthcare in the future. So for your 50s, healthcare is going to be something you want to think about to make sure you have on track and you have some money aside in case you do want to retire early before 65 and when Medicare kicks in. Okay, the other things are, now in your 50s, depending when you're going to retire, you got to think about where you're putting your money as far as your savings. In your 20s, 30s, and 40s, you should be investing your money in much more of a growth or an aggressive growth type of allocation. So that could be somewhere between 70 to 100% equities or stocks inside of your retirement accounts. If you're in your 50s and you're getting close to retirement, you really might want to think about how you're setting up your accounts. Many people forget about this middle stage prior to retirement. So more than 5 years to retirement, you're in what's called the accumulation stage. That's where things can be aggressive. When you're 5 years away from retirement or less, you want to think about what's called the preservation stage. And many people forget about this. They forget to put some money aside and think about making sure that the markets don't do anything that makes their retirement get pushed out further. We don't want your retirement to get pushed out further due to a market change or a market disruption. So we want to have money that's in safe accounts, whether that be cash, short-term bonds, money markets, so that you have money aside so that if you want to retire, you have money there and you're not really stressed about that. So the preservation stage is very important. The decumulation stage or the distribution stage is going to start later after retirement, but prior to retirement, we have what's called that preservation stage. You might want to start a taxable brokerage account, which is a non-retirement account, which you can access those anytime. 401ks and IRAs are generally available at age 59 and a half or later. Your 401k, by the way, if you retire from the company that you have the 401k with at age 55 or later, you may be able to withdraw from your 401k at 55, called the rule of 55 if your plan allows it, but that's not for everybody. If you don't have that available to you, or you're only saving in IRAs, 59 and a half is the earliest age you can pull out of these accounts without any sort of penalty. So having some money in a taxable brokerage account or cash is going to help you balance out and distribute so that you have some safe money, some moderately invested money, and some growth money. That's the way you want to set it up. We call that our 3-bucket approach. Our keep it simple 3-bucket approach. Safe, moderate, and aggressive. Very simple way to keep your finances managed, but you want to start thinking about that more in your 50s. And then also in your 50s, you might want to start thinking about long-term care insurance. Long-term care is potentially very expensive. About 55% of people need a long-term care stay at some point in their later life. And the longer you wait to buy insurance, it can get very expensive. The reality is though, 45% of people may never stay in a long-term care facility. And the average stay for men is about 1.5 years, and average stay for women is about 2.5 years at this point. So if you're married, you might want to plan for 4 years total of staying in a long-term care facility. In today's dollars, that might be $60,000 to $100,000 per year each. In future dollars, it's going to be a lot more. The thing with the long-term care is that we have these robots coming, okay? That's a very, very possible reality. So the cost of long-term care may go down over time, but today it's still around $60,000 to $100,000 per year. If the Tesla robots come out and those cost you $40,000 to $50,000 to buy one, that may be able to do a lot of your daily tasks that you normally couldn't do on your own, such as cook or clean or do the laundry and things like that. So if you want to buy long-term care insurance, buying it at 55 is going to be cheaper than it is at 60, and buying it at 60 is going to be cheaper than it is at 65. So something you want to think about. You want to talk to maybe a financial planner to help you out with that, but that's something you want to start thinking about. We're getting into the 60s. The 60s is go time. Most people do not want to work beyond their 60s. Some people do, and some people really like what they're doing, and that's completely fine. But most people want to start thinking about retiring during this time, and this is the traditional retirement time. So this is where we need to begin those discussions about retirement income. If you want to retire, where's the money going to come from? More than likely, you qualify for Social Security. You're going to have a portion of your income that is covered by Social Security. Beyond that, you may have to focus on investment income or savings, possibly a pension. Maybe you want to purchase an annuity, or if you have a rental real estate, you can use the income from the rental real estate to cover that. These are all options, but these are things you want to be thinking about now is how are you going to pay for your lifestyle once you no longer have a paycheck. It's a very big topic, and this is literally what I do for about 90% of my time. But you want to consider somewhere around 2 to 5 years worth of money that's in savings, that is in that very, very safe bucket that we talked about. You can also call that the now bucket. The money you're going to need next 2 to 5 years. You might make a little money by investing it, but honestly, it's not going to be much. And if you lose 10 or 20% of the value because the market takes a dip, you're going to be much more upset than you would if you just put that money away and kept it safe and took more risk in the money that you're not going to need for 10 years or more. So along with that, you're also going to want to set up the second 2 buckets. So the second one is called the soon bucket, and the third one is called the later bucket. Your soon bucket is going to be a moderate mix of stocks and bonds, most likely. You can have a little bit of cash equivalents, that's fine. But somewhere between 40 to 60% stocks and 40 to 60% bonds is going to be a good mix for your soon bucket. Beyond that, money that you don't need for 10 years or more, that money you can keep more aggressive. You might want to keep that somewhere between 70 or 80 or even higher percentage in equity type mutual funds or ETFs. But that type of philosophy needs to be managed as well. So each year, as you're drawing your money out of your accounts in your 60s, you're going to take a year of safe money out, put it in your spending account, spend that. Well, now you're going to need to move a year worth of money from your soon bucket down to your now bucket, and a year from your later bucket down to your soon bucket. And that's how you're going to manage your retirement income over time. That's something in your 60s that's going to be very, very important for you to make sure you stay on track and you don't run out of money. You also, in your 60s, are going to really start thinking about retirement planning in many aspects, including tax planning. Taxes are something that if you get this right in retirement, you can possibly save multiple 6 figures, maybe even 7 figures, which would be $1 million or more in taxes if your accounts are large enough. This is not uncommon. $200,000, $500,000, or $700,000 in saved taxes is the norm if you have a proper tax planning strategy. The thing is, so many people want to do this on their own, but in reality, you have to have basically an orchestra of things all working together. Distributions, conversions, investments, and cash flow all need to be properly managed so that not only do you not run out of money, but also that you're managing your optimal situation for you in your current tax bracket, your current and future needs, and then also planning for if you have what's called the widow penalty. And what that means is if you or your spouse passes away early, after a couple years, you go from joint filer tax brackets to single filer tax brackets. So if you have all of your money in pre-tax accounts and then you go to a single filer tax bracket, you're going to end up paying a whole lot more in taxes than you would have if you would have planned early. So tax planning is going to be super, super important in your 60s. So other than that, it's going to be just make sure you're enjoying life, maximizing yourself, maximizing your health, spending time with family, getting those vacations in, and really enjoying the best years of your life. Now we have your 70s. Your 70s are where maybe you're really healthy still, but maybe you're getting a little bit more towards the age you got to think about the long-term care planning stage. This is so different depending on you and your current situation. But the 70s is when you really want to start having that very honest discussion about long-term care living plans. Are you going to stay at home and have a spouse take care of you if something would happen to you early? Are you going to go to maybe an assisted care facility where you have someone just helping out with all the basic stuff? Or maybe you have to go to a full care facility because you can't do a whole lot, and that can get very, very expensive. So all of these things need to be planned for. And what you need to think about there is if you have to go to a full care facility and you have to pay for it out of your pocket, if all your money is in a pre-tax account like a traditional IRA or traditional 401k, and you have to take a massive taxable distribution, this can bump up your taxes and not only bump up your tax rate, but also possibly bump up the tax you have to pay on your Medicare. There's something called IRMA, Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. And if you're single, it's about over $97,000. If you go above that number in income, you're gonna have to pay a little bit extra tax. And if you're joint, if you have 2 people still on the household, it's double that number. So if you're joint, very few people go over that, but single filers can go over that very easily. So by having money in Roth accounts or taxable accounts where you're not gonna have a big tax bill to use that money to fund your long-term care, that's really gonna set you up for success in those later years. So you really wanna think about that. And then now, required minimum distributions have been pushed back. So if you've never heard of the term required minimum distributions or RMDs, those are required to be taken from your accounts like traditional IRAs and pre-tax 401ks starting at age 73 today. If you're born in 1960 or later, that will be pushed to 75. But after 73 or 75, you're going to be forced to take a percentage out of your account each year to make the government happy, basically. The IRS wants their tax money. About 80 or 90% of people need this money to live on anyway, so that's not a huge problem. But for those of you that don't need the money to live on, either you have low expenses, you have great fixed income, or you just oversaved where you have a lot of money there, This is where that tax planning early really comes into play. And if you wait until your 70s to worry about this, this can really be a big problem for you over time. So tax planning starting, really close to, all throughout your life, you need to have tax planning, first of all. But it becomes much more important as soon as you retire and you have a big income drop. Because once your income drops, before you take Social Security, if you do delay Social Security or pensions, that's gonna be the lowest your income ever is. And that's the best time to start taking money out of those pre-tax accounts, because you can get money out of 0% potentially taxes, or maybe 10, or maybe 12. But once you start kicking in all the pensions and Social Security, that number could be at least 12, and if not higher, maybe like 22 or 24% each time you take a distribution. So that can be very painful. So that's the basics of what you should be thinking about each decade. Once again, my name is Jason Hamilton. I'm a certified financial planner, and we're here to help you out with any of your financial needs. If you'd like to discuss your retirement or just your financial planning in general, or getting help with investment management, we offer all of those services. We're a comprehensive financial planning firm. You can go to keepitsimplefinancial.com. And if you want to schedule a talk to speak with us personally on an initial consultation, which we do on a complimentary basis, you go to keepitsimplefinancial.com/talk. Thank you so much.